Alright guys, for our first video I just wanted to go over what is CNC, how does it work, what do you need if you're right now. This video would be good for you if you're researching and trying to figure out, do I want to buy one, do I want to do this, which one do I need to get, and what do I need to know. So this is for someone who's probably beginning to researching, or just got their machine and might be overwhelmed. So essentially with CNC, it's just, all it is a program, any kind of program that usually runs like I run. I'm using a language called Gerbl, G-R-B-L, and it's just a language that essentially takes your software program where you design something, converts it into this language, and then that language is sent to a control box to where it sends those motions and go left, go right, go up or down, this much, that much, and converts it into a creation that you're trying to do on your machine. So essentially what you're going to need is obviously a CNC machine, and that could be just about a million different options. So essentially what a CNC machine is basically going to need, obviously you're going to need your router if you're going to be cutting things. Later you could change this out with a laser for etching, or even like a diode laser or a plasma cutter. You keep getting more expensive and bigger. So essentially you need a router that will actually cut. You'll need the actual machine that gives you your rails going y-axis, going forward and back. You'll need your axis that goes left and right, which is called your x-axis, and you'll need the z-axis, which is what goes up and down. And there are different variations of that. My machine is belt driven, so it just uses these rubber belts, and they could be thin, they could be thicker. You can use screw drive, which is what I have here. I've upgraded to, so it's just a metal with thread on it and comes up and down. And what the difference of that is that your belt driven is made of rubber, so obviously rubber is going to expand and contract. It might not be quite as stable as something like metal, where it's on a screw and it's not going to be shifted or jolted. When it comes to carving out harder things, the screwdriver is going to be better because it's not going to be jolting around when it has difficulty, whereas a belt may have more difficulty with harder material. So that's essentially an upgrade for screw drive. There are machines that have screw drive on all access points, and my next upgrade, if I ever change machines, would be a screw drive on all access, just because it's more supportive and just all around bang for your buck is a lot better than these cheap belts, which is essentially like an entry-level machine. So you got your router, you got your machine with your Y, X, and Z axis, and then you're gonna have all this wiring that goes back to a control box. And mine is the standard X controller for the X carve machine, but they all come in all shapes and sizes. Essentially you'll have all the wiring going. You have a motor as well on each, so you have a motor here, a motor on this side of Y to control the up and down. You've got a motor back here that controls it from going side to side, and then you've got a fourth motor up here that controls the up down. So all that connects into the controller, and every setup for that is different for every box. And also in the controller you have different variations to switch things on and off, and relays. It can get pretty complex, but essentially you've got your frame of rails, your router, your motors that move it, and they all go back to the controller. And my controller is just hooked up to my laptop through, I don't know what you call this connection here, but it just goes back to your computer. Mine also has a pause and play button on it, as well as a cancel button. Not all of them have that, and also it has a red button that lets you stop in case of an emergency. So essentially you're going to need a laptop and your CNC machine, and you can buy it out of the box like I did from Xcarve. I know there are a lot of other options out there. You can build your own on a site like openbuilds.com. They kind of give you kits to build it yourself. If you're just starting out and you're not that familiar, I'd recommend getting a pre-built machine that you can have to put together yourself, such as the Xcarve or the Sharpedo. Probably don't want to go into building it yourself unless you're really knowledgeable with CNCing or just really good at DIY. Yeah, so essentially you're gonna need your router, which this is the DeWalt 611, which is a pretty standard. There are other spindles as well. This is my second router in 3 years, so they do last a pretty good amount, probably a couple years a piece. And you may need to buy brushes later when those wear out. So you got your router, your rails, your motors, and you've got your control box, which speaks to your laptop. So once you get all that set up and running, configured correctly, now you're going to need two things. You're going to need a software that you can design your things you want to cut, and that will export a file, which is typically called a G-code file, which is what I've been using. And then you need a program that will actually cut using that G-code file. So there's a bunch of things out there. When I got started with the X-Carve, which is made by Inventables, they have their own machine or software called, I can't remember what it's called, but it's their own website you could log into, which you could use their software that would cut as well. And since upgrading, I've upgraded. I'm currently using VCarve or Vectric. It's probably the industry standard, the most popular software when it comes to designing things and exporting those files to be cut. And then as far as a software that I use to actually take that design file and cut, I've been using Pixender, and I'm probably going to be switching soon to Open Builds Control. But there's a lot of other things out there. I think USG is another popular one. You just have to go out there and find what's good for you. There's a lot of free ones. With Pixender, I think I paid $30 for it. One-time fee done. I'm thinking about switching to Open Builds Controller, which is free. And I think USG might be as free as well. There's a lot of different ones out there. So essentially I'm using VCarve Pro to design. I export into G-code, and then my program I'm using right now is Pixender, which is what's on the screen, to actually interpret and make that. So that is essentially the basics. You're going to need your machine that talks to your controller, that talks to your laptop, and then you're going to need a software that designs the program, such as VCarve, and then you're going to need a software that actually takes that design file and actually sends it to the machine to carve. So that's essentially what you will need in the basics of CNCing.